Do you feel like your son was failed by institutions involved?
Yes, more than failed. Not more so by our local government failed Ahmaud.
If it was now and you guys heard that a victim had gone to the bishop and said, this happened to me, and they told this person, it's a conjecture, nothing we can do, that person would be facing criminal charges.
They'd be facing an investigation to determine if criminal charges existed.
What do you know of him that makes you feel confident that he would do the right thing?
The way he is served and what I could gain in my discussions with him, the pastors that have served with him, the parishioners.
Okay, but it is important to point out that Republic had issues with the city way before the pandemic. Does it put pressure, or is it helpful that they're there if you have something left over?
It's real simple. If we've got it left over and it's in the syringe, we're not looking to throw anything away.
Do you feel like you have an obligation to the community, though, to let them know what the problem was? We're just wanting to know why you are not answering our questions.
What questions are you talking about?
Talking about the bus driver. Men they were told to trust, but train them in a sacred space. Secret church files show top leaders of the Diocese of St. Augustine failed to tell police about allegations its priest molested Jacksonville children.
The church historically hid it.
The church only exposing most priest crimes years after they died. But the whole truth still hasn't been told. The truth is hiding in secret files the diocese has kept for years. Records they exclusively had access to until court orders forced the diocese to hand them over to state investigators.
I wasn't giving the church a choice. They were going to provide me these records, or I was going to go get them.
Now we're telling you the whole story, starting in 1980, when Reverend William Malone, a visiting priest from Ireland, was assigned to Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Jacksonville. In an internal report from 2019, church investigators detailed how Reverend Malone repeatedly molested a young girl during the sacrament of confession. The girl was only 11 years old. Diocese investigators said one of the times Father Malone touched her, he pointed and said, "Be good or the devil is going to get you." Records show more than 10 years later, the girl told her mother about the abuse.
Then we will have
Diocese records detail her parents met with then Bishop of the Diocese of St. Augustine, Bishop John Snyder, in 1991. But records show the church dismissed the allegations then as conjecture, saying the victim was unwilling to meet with the diocesan officials. But in January 1991, despite Bishop Snyder dismissing allegations Malone molested an 11-year-old girl and not reporting the allegations to police, he transferred Malone to a different church within the diocese, St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Church in Palm Coast, Florida. The next year, the diocese transferred him to a parish in Long Island, and eventually, he went back to the diocese in Ireland. In a letter from August 1993 to Bishop Snyder, church leaders in Ireland wrote that while Reverend Malone couldn't remember abusing children, he accepted something happened. The admission by Father Malone is not the only bombshell in the letter. The letter itself was to discuss child support payments. To a young parishioner, Father Malone got pregnant in the late 1980s while an assistant pastor at Sacred Heart. Records on Sacred Heart letterhead show the payments split between the diocese and the Holy Ghost Fathers Order of Long Island. The payments to Father Malone's child began in January 1992 and continued until 2010. Despite what church leaders knew, allegations against Father Malone were not reported to law enforcement. That 11-year-old victim, now an adult, came forward again in 2003. She wrote a letter telling the new bishop, Victor Gallione, she was hurt, not just once, but twice by the way it was handled. The diocese's own records show the victim met with Bishop Victor Gallione in 2003, but that the Diocesan Review Board was never called to investigate the allegations. And again, Neither were police. It was not until 2018, the third time she spoke up, 27 years after her parents told Bishop Snyder, that the diocese reported the allegations to police and its own parishioners. But the diocese did not tell parishioners that they were told about the allegations against Father Malone decades ago, or that they for years paid child support to a child he fathered while a priest at Sacred Heart. Diocese records also showed other victims had come forward over the years with stories of how Father Malone molested them. In 1994, a woman's husband reported she was molested by Father Malone during counseling sessions with the priest in 1982. She was 15 at the time. Police reports say she was molested once a week for 6 weeks by Father Malone. The church, again, did not report the allegations. That woman didn't come forward again until 2019. The same year, a third victim came forward, telling the diocese she was molested in 1981 at Sacred Heart Catholic Church by Father Malone. We wanted to hear the church's explanation for how these cases were handled, but church officials at the Diocese of St. Augustine refused to sit down with our team to talk about the records. The prosecutor who led the Florida Attorney General's investigation into historical sex abuse in the Florida churches did.
So if it was now and you guys heard that a victim had gone to the bishop and said, this happened to me, and they told this person, it's a conjecture, nothing we can do, that person would be facing criminal charges.
They'd be facing an investigation to determine if criminal charges existed, whether it be for interfering with an investigation, whether it be for either witness tampering, evidence, manipulating evidence, whether it be for failure to report. There's a number of things that could apply in these types of cases. But we're talking about crimes here that need to be reported to law enforcement. And that was another problem with the church. They weren't doing it.
A lot of the times it looks like they're conducting their own investigation before they even take it to police.
Are you speaking about now or before?
Or just what some of these records lay out, that they were doing their own investigation and then possibly taking it to police. Is that problematic?
Yes, it is. And that's one of the things I tried to communicate to the church and that I would recommend to them that they need to do. They have their own, what they call diocesan review boards, that when there's a complaint, these diocesan review boards will look at, and it's members of the diocese, whether it's church members, whether it's former police officers, even former prosecutors in some cases sit on these boards. And they will look at them and they will investigate and they will recommend to the bishop what the bishop should do in regards to that person. The problem is diocesan review boards don't have any criminal powers. Law enforcement has criminal powers. So the diocesan review boards, and I've tried to make this clear, they don't need to be investigating this and then deciding if it goes to law enforcement. The minute the allegation is made, they need to notify law enforcement and make sure law enforcement doesn't mind them taking a look. The church is incapable of policing itself. The church should not be relying on the church or diocesan review boards to police whether or not crimes are being committed against children or anything else. That is for law enforcement to do.
In November, the Office of Statewide Prosecutors released the findings of its 2-year investigation into every Catholic diocese in Florida. In the report, investigators say they received no tip about current conduct inside the church or of children in imminent danger. But in total, the report listed 97 priests credibly accused of sexual abuse in Florida churches, including Reverend William Malone. But what the report did not detail was any of the abuse experienced by Jacksonville children or the cover-up by the Diocese of St. Augustine leaders. What happened to the victims of Father Malone is a snapshot of the history of the Diocese of St. Augustine and how they handled allegations of sex abuse against its priest. And it's an even smaller look at Catholics say possibly the biggest issue facing leaders of Florida's Catholic churches, even now, is openness. In that letter to Bishop Gallione in 2003, the 11-year-old who Father Malone first abused shared how the abuse and the cover-up left her faith. She wrote, "I was abused by a man of God and ignored by men of God who were supposed to protect their flock." A year after getting the phone call, her son, Ahmaud Arbery, was shot and killed, and Wanda Jones is still working to keep the promise she made to her son and herself.
The day that I laid Ahmaud to rest, my last words to him was, I will find out what happened
1 year after his death, Jones is much closer to answers as new information continues to emerge in her son's case, including new video showing how Glynn County Police Department officers reacted after the fatal shooting.
Like I said, I can only imagine. I hope I never have to understand what you feel right now.
Arbery's family says he was running in the Satilla Shores neighborhood when father and son Travis and Gregory McMichael began chasing him through the neighborhood, eventually shooting Arbery 3 times. Greg McMichael told police he thought Arbery was a burglary suspect. In the 10 weeks after the shooting, the accused killers faced no arrest. The state prosecutor assigned to the case, George Barnhill, had written his death off as a justifiable homicide before recusing himself at Arbery's mother's request. It wasn't until video of the shooting was released by a local radio station that the case gained national attention. Within a day of the Georgia Bureau of Investigations taking over the case, investigators arrested the McMichaels for murder.
What was so surprising is that Glynn County Police Department, they saw the video minutes, hours after it happened. They saw it and they didn't see anything wrong.
Do you feel like your son was failed by institutions involved?
Yes, more than failed. Not more so by our local government failed Ahmaud. Like I said, the officers that were on the scene, they saw the video. The Monday, the Tuesday of the next week, the sheriff knew that there was a video. If I didn't take a stand, this case would have been closed and gone.
Jones is now filing a lawsuit on her son's behalf, targeting the 3 men accused in his murder, the Glynn County Police Department, and the 2 prosecutors who were first attached to the case. In it, Jones claims the Glynn County Police Department authorized former District Attorney Investigator Gregory McMichael, his son, and another Satilla Shores neighbor to act as law enforcement in a text message sent weeks before Arbery's death.
What was very uncomforting was at first when they were saying Ahmaud was a criminal. Ahmaud was a young man that, several times in life he chose to make wrong decisions. And that was very, very, very heartbreaking to know that he was dead, and then they were still bringing up the things that he had done as a young adult. But at the same time, I had to refocus myself that on the day of February 23rd, Ahmaud was not doing anything wrong, and Ahmaud was killed.
I have to imagine sometimes you just are overwhelmed with all of it.
I just sit back and sometimes I find myself in a stare from, say, hours, to sit back and just in a deep trance, just trying to make sense of it all. And sometimes I come out of it the same way I entered it, making no sense of it all.